I believe you are well. My name is Paul Mwangi, and I'm an expert in conservation agriculture. And for a long time in this country, farmers have suffered a lot because of the use of the normal conventional farming systems. So I would like to talk about conservation agriculture here. I'll put forward the methodologies of how you are supposed to go about it, so that you can save cost and you can save your soil from the degradation that happens or comes around when you do soil inversion year in, year out, season in, season out. Tillage or soil inversion by use of a tractor or an animal plow or a normal hoe does disturb the soil life underneath. Soil has living organisms. It has bacteria, it has rotivars, protozoa, it has many even earthworms, and it has its colloidal structure. So the moment you involve mechanical tillage all through, what you do is you destroy the channels, the mechanisms, and the blocks, and the life. You disturb the environment that these organisms live in. These organisms, I may not be able to give you the full details because a lot of the science there is microscopic. But they are the ones that turn around organic material, the elements of soil colloidal charge and water systems to be able to avail the nutrients to the plant. Just like you would heap some manure somewhere and bacteria work on it until it becomes something good to use in the farm. The same case applies to what happens in the soil. The organic material that is there, for the elements like phosphorus, nitrogen, and others, magnesium, selenium, to be available to plants, it has to go through, to be worked on by these organisms for it to be available. And in many situations, you actually disturb that system, because when you disturb the system, then that process does not happen. It is like you are building a house, and then all of a sudden somebody comes and disperses the workers, because the house will not be complete. So tillage, in a nutshell, you disturb that process. One of the ways is that you pulverize the soil so much, it becomes so fine, such that even the biofilms that these organisms leave behind that bind the soil particles together is no longer there. It's no longer available. So it is a process that when you carry it year in, year out, you are actually destroying the soil. The other thing is that when you turn the soil, a lot of humus that is available for the plant use is in gaseous form. So you burn it with oxygen, so it disappears in the atmosphere. Most likely you have gone into an area where land is being plowed, a virgin land is being plowed by a tractor, and here you smell some kind of a new smell. And that smell is what some of the nutrients running away or disappearing in the atmosphere. You have ventured or gone into a goat kraal and you experience some smell. These are some of the fertilizers or the organic fertilizers that are disappearing into the atmosphere in form of ammonia, in form of hydrogen sulfide. So they are disappearing. So when you till land, you destroy the mechanism. I'll give you an example of if land is fallow and it, for example, had maize planted on it and maybe other crops like pigeon peas. If you take a section of that soil, like the way you'd cut bread, you realize that the roots are hanging under that soil substratum. So if those roots decompose after some time, those channels become the hose pipe that allow water to infiltrate into the soil. And at the same time, the horizon that held that root zone, or the horizon that held those roots, accumulates some amount of organic matter, which later decomposes and replenishes the soil organic nutrients. So there's a lot of biological life and activity when these living organisms are not disturbed. Many people may ask a question, how can I go ahead and plant if the land is not plowed? This is where I will tell you that in most cases, you will need to only dig where you are putting the seed, because you have to put the seed at the end of the day. So you disturb the soil only that area where you are putting the seed. The other thing, and a lot of people ask this question, how do I control the weeds? Weeds are a major problem, and a lot of people who are doing soil tillage, actually one of the things that they try to do is to eliminate the weeds, but it doesn't disappear. That is a fact that, and what amazes a lot of people, you till so much and the weeds do not appear. So you have to find ways of controlling weeds. In the first few seasons, you may need to use herbicides, because what you are doing is you want to sweep a lot of weeds to reduce them to a minimal level that is not dangerous to the crop, or that will not jeopardize the performance of the crops. The other thing is you can do shallow weeding. Put people with a djembe or a hoe or a machete and scratch just the top layer. You scratch the weeds so that the weeds, a majority of them will die. You can uproot with your hand. If it is a large area, for example 1 to 5 acres, and maybe the labor is limited or is expensive, you may need to resort to herbicides. Herbicides work well because we have variety of them in the market. And the other question people ask is, if I use a herbicide, do I not endanger the life in the soil? Herbicides are also pesticides. They are not friendly to the environment. But you not keep using them year in, year out. Nature has a way of healing itself. You use for the first few seasons, you manage the land well, so that in 1 or 2, from the first to the third season and onwards, you are not able to use as much herbicide. You actually reduce it to the minimum. And if you go to many farmers in countries where they are producing a lot of food, you realize that some crops like wheat and others, canola, there is no way you can grow them if the weeds are there, if you don't have to use herbicides. But now this balance is when you leave the soil to benefit from the natural status by not disturbing it so much, by leaving residue to rot and to preserve moisture on the soil surface, you build that soil life so much that even if there was a level of some external pesticide use, it will not actually overweigh the goodness that is in the soil. So even it is in the case of doing the normal cropping, like planting maize, pigeon peas, cowpeas, beans, you will have to dig the holes using a line, and you put your seeds during the dry season and wait for the rains. And when the rains come, before the weeds germinate, you can cover up with some pesticide, put pre-emergence, or before the crops can germinate, then you'll be required maybe to use some herbicide to eliminate a lot of weeds, or even now employ people to do shallow weeding. The other thing is that you need to leave organic or plant or crop residues on the surface. Even if you have an extra source, it would be wise to import and bring into that land, because it will replenish the carbon nitrogen ratio that we talk about in the soil and many other nutrients. We normally advise people to encourage leguminous crops because they have more, the carbon nitrogen ratio is narrower as opposed to cereals, or maybe you can mix, so that you enhance that soil richness by ensuring that there is some cover on the soil and there is some material that is rotting and replenishing the organic material under there. It is the food for the microorganisms, and the microorganisms also, or the microbes, also turn that food into nutrients, which when you plant your maize or your cowpea, will feed on. Again, the moisture retention capacity. We want that soil we want those organisms to build, to release the biofilms, the gum that holds the soil particles, colloids together, so that those colloids, eventually the soil is enabled to return to its crambular structure that will allow water to infiltrate and percolate. So There are many things that happens, and I'll give an example. In many instances, when you leave land fallow for a season or 2 years, you realize that when you come back and plow that land and plant, crops do very well. So the natural way brings back the nutrient balance. There is a process we call cation exchange capacity, which is enhanced by microorganisms. When soil colloids or when nutrients or cations are locked up by the presence of so much of hydronium ion or aluminium ion, the plant is not able to access the basic or the most important cations. And this is something which is dangerous. So you may need to correct that. You may need to correct that by reducing that hydrolysis of alkaline or the accumulation of hydronium ion or aluminium ion. In this way, you may need to use some substances, rock substances like calcium sulfate, which will correct that. And a lot of people know something we call liming using calcium oxide. So that is something you can do. You can correct using those rock powders. But the most basic thing is to leave the soil as much as possible undisturbed. Disturb only where you are putting the seed. And then allow the soil to replenish slowly by slowly. As the years go by, you realize you not even need much external fertilizer, synthetic fertilizer, or chemical fertilizer as we call it, because the soil's fertility is building up slowly by slowly. If you have any question, I also have a book on conservation agriculture. There are also other books available on conservation agriculture. They may have many solutions regarding to how do I plant wheat, how do I plant carrots, there are many crops that we grow. And because of the caliber, the size of the seed, there are many methods which may need to be incorporated or to be considered for you to be able to put your seed into the soil, whichever size. Of course, there are crops that we call cover crops. You can grow your maize and put pumpkin. For some time in the season, that pumpkin will cover the soil for you to be a cover crop. It will protect the moisture in the soil. And only microorganisms will survive in the soil if the soil is moist. If the soil is too dry, the microorganisms have no life there. Water is life. Every living creature, however microscopic it is, requires water. So anyway, you may have a question. I will drop my number here. It is 0710 500 713. You can call me if you have any question or you want to practice conservation agriculture and you don't have a way to start. The way to start is to leave land without plowing. That is how to start, not to plow. And then plan how to put your seed in the dry season into pits, or you can dig some furrows. Those who use draft animals can use something we call a reaper. It is an attachment which is bolted onto a normal animal plow. And for those who are in areas where there are tractors have even machines which can plant directly into the soil, or they can do some furrows, or they can use a chisel plow to actually even break hard bands that normally occurs under the soil and prevents water from entering the soil. That is why you see disturbing the soil so much. When there is heavy downpour, you realize all the soil is carried away into the roadsides and into the rivers, and you find our rivers are all brown. That is not a dye or color like the kiwi we apply on shoes. It is soil, and mostly it is the topsoil. And by the way, if you lose a millimeter of soil from 1 hectare of land, you are losing 15 tons of soil. So this is very dangerous because we are losing the top layer, which is productive, which has the fertility. So again, when you are doing conservation agriculture, you need to limit the traffic on your land. Don't allow animals into your land, cows, because they are doing compaction into the soil. And so next season your soil will be so hard hata mvua ikinyesha, it will be hard for the rainfall to penetrate. A lot of it will run away as runoff, and the percentage that will go into the soil will be minimal. So, and it's also good to rotate crops. You change deep-rooted crops with shallow-rooted crops. Don't plant maize all through at the same place, because you also want to break the cycles of pests and diseases. Change the crops, put cassava where you had put maize, put beans where you had put maize, change like that after 2 seasons, after 3 seasons, like that. But the most important thing and the basic one is to stop disturbing the soil as much as possible and to stop compacting it. For any question, you are welcome. Thank you.